This is the Pink Lifestyle Podcast. Rebranded, updated, and now based on the practice of mindfulness. It is my mission to guide and coach women toward a pink lifestyle. Purposeful, intentional, natural, and kind. We'll do this by discussing topics such as image and presence enrichment, integrative self-care, health and wellness, mindful thinking, and spiritual awareness. I am your host, Karen Bannister, and I am a certified image consultant and life coach. My opinions and insights are based on scientific research, personal experiences, and my own intuitive power, and will help your physical representation awaken and represent your inner strength and self-image. You can contact me on my website, KarenKBannister.com, or email pinklifestylepodcast@gmail.com. I invite you to follow and connect with me on social media channels as the Pink Lifestyle Podcast. This podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and others. Thank you for listening, and your journey toward finding your personal inner power begins now. Thank you for being here for the Pink Lifestyle Podcast. Once again, I do appreciate your time, and I know that with you being here, that you aren't interested in designing your own pink lifestyle, purposeful, intentional, natural, and kind. And on that note, I'm bringing to you an amazing guest this episode. Very timely, very knowledgeable. It's going to be, you're all going to love it. You're going to love her. You're going to use her service. It's amazing. But Dr. Andrea Leschak holds a Doctor of Pharmacy degree and is a Board-Certified Geriatric Pharmacist. Her career spans more than 25 years serving patients in various healthcare settings, including the community as a civilian contractor in the U.S. Army in Germany. Also in a long-time care consultant and as a university faculty member. In 2019, she created Wayfinder Advantage that focuses on, and oh my gosh, here we go, on pre-travel planning, travel mindset, travel coaching, and event health risk mitigation consultation. I mean, this is amazing. Andrea, thank you so much for being here. I'm just so thankful, and I can't wait to hear everything, and it's going to be just amazing. But, you know, it really piques my curiosity. Going from pharmacy into what got you there? What got on that path? And oh my gosh, I want to know everything.
Well, I mean, it's one of those situations where or at least for me, I was too close to it to actually see that this path was unfolding over the past 20 years. I had been a traveler my whole life. I love traveling. When I was younger, I was always glued to, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I tell my parents I was going to live on a boat and study fish. But I lived right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and, there's not a lot of oceans there. And so my college counseling was one more of, well, maybe you should find a job that pays. Because, like, how many of those do they need in the world, right? And, as parents, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I could understand where they were coming from because, I was 17, had never lived anywhere and, back then other than at home. And so I could see where they were trying to protect me. My dad was a pharmacist. Lots of family members were pharmacists. And so it was kind of a natural transition. But when I got into school, or after I graduated, school was actually fine. Loved the material, really enjoyed it, graduated, and found out I hated it. And so it was one of those things where, my parents had paid for it and I'd always worked hard and, really followed their guidance. And so I just really kept my head down and was going to suck it up. And I had this vision that when I was 42, and I don't know why 42 struck in my head,
Okay.
I probably calculated the math, but I was going to retire and then I'd go get a fun job. That was kind of my vision.
Okay.
Then, kind of like what happens in life happens and you're like, where'd this come from? My mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer and I was in my early 30s and she was given 6 weeks to live.
Oh.
And so everything screeched to a halt. I started reflecting on what I've been doing for the past 10 years. I'm watching her. She was an avid traveler. We all loved traveling. And truly, I think the reason she made it more than 6 weeks was because she had a brand new grandbaby and she wanted to travel.
Huh?
And so after her treatment, when we were kind of given the go to get on the road, she wanted to go to Disney. She wanted to take a cruise. And the whole time I'm traveling with her, I'm just a wreck, watching her because you don't want her to get sick. We're trying to make sure that things don't happen to her.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I learned a lot. Because obviously I was a pharmacist. I was living overseas by then. And so it was just all of that, all of the challenges that you wanted to be in the moment with her, but we were trying, my sister and I, were trying to keep her safe and healthy. And so that was the early piece of it when I started thinking about, there's got to be a different way. I came back to the States. I had an opportunity to work in long-term care. I changed the type of work, so I didn't hate it anymore.
Okay.
But I still hadn't found that final, to make the change.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, the final wake-up call, so to speak, my dad was diagnosed with cognitive impairment, and that was really it. I said, this is just really, there's too many, warning signs. There's too many, how many wake-up signs calls do you need, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yes. And so that was it. I took a year off. I looked at all the skills that I had, everything that I've been doing for the past 30 years with travel, my hobbies. I dive, I sail, a little bit of hiking and things like that. And I said, okay, this is what I got. What can I do? And it just started looking back at all of those times with my mom, with my dad, different travels where we've had, illness strike in the middle of, Egypt. And you're like, oh my gosh, what do we do next? And those are the things that it all just kind of fell together. And so I pieced together, what would I have wanted for, like, where was that lifeline that I would have wanted? And I basically created that. And that's what Wayfinder Advantage is. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So your company is, I think you just formed it last year, right?
Yep. Last November officially.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, it's been an interesting year. I think we can all agree. Yeah. So I think you're saying that you plan like emergency, planning for travel and healthcare and travel. What exactly specific services do you provide to somebody who's looking for help? Mm-hmm. If they're traveling, is it you mentioned mindset? Is it just nervous travelers? Is it people with health concerns? Is it both? I mean, who do you serve?
Well, there's a couple of different, I guess you could say, directions that this goes. Okay. In terms of pre-travel planning, and that's a lot of what I was doing with my mom, or, where you're looking at basically three factors. What a client or the traveler brings to the table, and that's mindset, perception, the skills that they bring. Are they a new traveler? Are they an advanced traveler? What their underlying health is, baseline health. So that is all one factor. That all kind of groups up in what I say, what they bring to the table. The other piece is the destination. So what's the destination itself like? Is it politically stable? Does it have a more modern health system, modern transportation, or is it one that's a little bit more rugged, a little bit more, emerging? And then you're looking at the activities that the person wants to do. So you're using all three pieces, all three factors to really sit back and look at how can you craft the best outcome, the most successful travel opportunities. Now, the people that I generally work with have some kind of underlying health challenge. So maybe it's chronic illness like diabetes, hypertension, maybe they're on blood thinners. It could be a person receiving active chemo. And so they could have a challenge or a concern maybe of getting opioids, like they got to travel with pain medications. How can you travel with that? Can you take them to the country you're going to? Wow. So there's a lot of logistics involved in that aspect. So the pre-travel planning consultation really looks at all of that. We create strategies, make sure that the travel goal fits where the person is. Mm-hmm. And if it's not, how can we alter the experience? Do we have time to get the person ready? I like to use something like Machu Picchu as an example.
Okay.
If somebody wants to hike Machu Picchu, that's awesome. Have they ever been at altitude? Right?
Yeah.
If they haven't and they have underlying conditions, do we have time to at least get them some exposure to altitude? Can they take a mini vacation before, maybe to Colorado if this is in the States, even to New Hampshire where we have some mountains, someplace that we could get a little bit above sea level, right? To at least see how they respond. If not, and we don't have enough time, is it one of those things where maybe you don't hike Machu Picchu, maybe you take the train? You at least get to see Machu Picchu, but not 4 days, exactly. You're not 4 days out there camping, climbing through mountain passes.
Wow.
So that's one type. The other, and I mentioned, is more of the traveler's mindset. And this came about from years of, and I sail and diving, but more recently it was the sailing where I'm talking to, generally it's female, women who may or may not have a sailing partner, but they just have this concept of adventure travel being beyond their reach for any number of reasons.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. Yeah.
And I can too, because especially as you get older, learning new skills, embarking on new hobbies, having a beginner's mindset, willing to fail, there is some inherent risk associated with it. But until you learn that every time you push yourself a little bit, you exceed that boundary, that becomes your new baseline. So no longer does it look so scary, right? Because now you have a new goal.
Right.
So that's more of the travel mindset piece. So that person who's like, I don't think I could never see myself diving with sharks. Well, you don't start diving with sharks. You start on a nice little reef, that's like, continuous snorkel.
That's good to know. Okay.
And then we baby step. It's not like you're going to transit the Atlantic. You start in someplace like Long Island Sound or Pimlico Bay or something. You take those small steps, and then the more you learn,
right,
the more comfortable you are.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you put together an entire plan. If somebody comes to you with this big dream,
yes,
of what they want to do, and you can really lay out the entire plan. Mm-hmm. The smaller steps to get them to where they need to be,
yep,
taking into consideration any health concerns or other conditions. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
It was really one of those, like I said, it was one of those services that I wasn't really seeing. I mean, travel clinics, like pre-travel planning in terms of a university, if you went to a university or maybe a clinic, they could tell you what immunizations you need. And they could pull up some information maybe off the State Department. And, there's certainly a place for that. And, at a minimum, that kind of existed. But that next level that really looked at making sure that, they were looking at what you might perceive as your barriers, or look at actual barriers or logistical challenges, and then give you, take you to that next level to where travel becomes opportunity, it becomes possible, really getting back to that life affirming that kept my mom going. With my dad, it's multi-generational travel with somebody with cognitive impairment, making those memories. And that type of experience takes more level of effort than something that can generally be done in 30 minutes. And especially if you have people that want to do some of these more physically demanding, we need a little bit of lag, of time to be able to get physical abilities up, and that might involve, different types of exercise, diet, there's a number of different pieces that go into crafting that experience.
Wow. So it's almost like you're such a one-stop shop, seems to be for this. So how involved do you get with, say, someone does need extra medical consideration or planning? Do you work with a doctor, or you just do you tell your clients what questions to ask the doctor, or how involved do you get with that part?
It really depends on what the person needs, because my end goal is success, right? I want that person to take the tiller if they're learning how to sail and, be there, the skipper in command. I want the person to be at the top of the mountain, to have that picture, where they're doing a thumbs up.
Yeah.
And so the way I've crafted the different packages or the consultations is that it really depends on what they need and how I have to work with their providers. If somebody is receiving active chemo, and let's say they get medications drop shipped to their front door weekly, right? That's a different level of coordination than looking at somebody saying, okay, you had cancer in the past, you're generally healthy, this is where you're going. They have a modern medical system. Let's find you some clinics that are there that, where they speak English, if that's your primary, your first language. That's one level of intervention. But if you have somebody that is actively requiring more medical care en route, obviously I'm going to have to spend more time and work with, whether it be the physician, it could be, other types of support clinics, people that maybe you're receiving dialysis, right? You can have that done in other countries, right? So, and there's ways to manage that. But again, you're having to set those appointments up, find places that meet the standards that you would want to be cared for. And then also find out how are you going to pay for those services? Because most, insurances in the United States do not cover medical care outside the country. And so what does that piece look like? So helping you find the best insurance that will give you what you need while you're on the road.
Well, this is a service I've never heard of before. This is phenomenal. I think you've really found this is an amazing niche. This is wow, listeners. I really hope. Oh my gosh, I any questions? Andrea, I think you're the gal to go to. This is phenomenal. So now in the current environment, there's other things to consider. I'm sure you've had to add another layer of
right,
consideration or learning or inspection or whatever. How have you adapted or dealt with what we're dealing with now?
Right. It's been a little bit of a shift because the information changes so quickly. And so how does a traveler plan for, changes where borders may open or close, airlines may stop flying into the country, with very little warning? Right. How are you managing that while still trying to, go out and have the experience? I just talked to a woman about a week ago where they decided to have a very scaled down version of a wedding. Her son was getting married. She said that they decided they wanted to go through. It wasn't against the state regulations. So we sat down and we worked every failure point of the experience, because I'm sure if you've been watching the TV, you'll see these events where things get completely out of control.
Yeah.
And we walked through it, and the bride and groom wanted it. They had buy-in from everybody that was going to be there to, I hate to say do it right, but they were going to follow the guidelines and honor the bride and groom's, wishes on, social distancing, hand washing, hand sanitizing. So we went through every aspect of that, the hotel, the venue, how to look at the CDC guidelines, what does that look like when you put that into place, any state and local ordinances they have to follow. And just this morning we did kind of the after action, and she was telling me about, everything worked really well. Weather always happens right at a wedding, so they had to shift the sky. But she was like, everybody followed the rules. We had these really cute masks. Everybody, the tables apart. But what was interesting, because you were talking about that, that how everything is so dynamic right now. Mm-hmm. One of the individuals that had planned to come backed out 48 hours before the wedding because his company said if he traveled anywhere, he would not be allowed to work for 14 days. So it wasn't, It wasn't a state, it wasn't local, ordinances. It was a company policy that said if you've changed your quarantine, if you want to call it that, the group that you typically are around, you can't work for 14 days and we're not covering that. So he ended up having to stay.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a lot of moving pieces with what's going on right now. And how do you plan and keep yourself prepared for, I really say that it's, the traveler has to be very self-reliant right now because you just don't know.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Things change on a daily, sometimes hourly. I mean, sometimes you watch the news in the morning and by that evening, it's like, that's what? Everything's changed. So I can't, oh my gosh. But it does sound like that you have the knowledge to help your clients, work through this.
Right.
Not just, in the States, but kind of on a global, if people do decide now still to travel, where they can travel.
Right.
You'll be able to back them up or at least, guide them on that.
Right. I mean, it's a lot of providing insight in terms of international travel right now because, the U.S. is basically not coming to pick people up anymore. So, when the first wave of shutdowns happened, the U.S. did a lot of, repatriation flights and went out and tried to get pockets of people. But, now, even though some of the warnings have, been kind of eased, they're not doing that. And so, I talk to people, my husband and I, there's some really good deals to Mexico. If it was just he and I going someplace, I wouldn't be too concerned because we're healthy. We've been to Mexico before. We know where we're going. But the minute you go further than you can drive comfortably back, right now, that's something to think about. So,
that's a good point.
So if you choose to leave the country, you do have to have extra, whether it be medications, that reliance piece, you have to be able to think, well, what happened if I got, if they close the borders and I'm here for 14 days, am I prepared for that? Can I manage that with work? What if, they put a quarantine package in and that you couldn't leave your hotel, Well, these countries are very serious about that. It's not one of those things where we might go, oh, I'll quarantine, once I stop by Whole Foods or I go to Aldi's or whatever, and then I'll go quarantine. No, they mean go from hotel to, from the airport to the hotel, don't pass go, so to speak. And then how do you get supplies, right? So then you've got to figure that out. So there's a lot of moving pieces apart. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, okay, so you're insightful and you know what questions to ask and what ideas and topics to address that people like myself, I might overlook. So
yeah,
that's
I like to do a lot of what would I do if?
Okay, yeah.
And working it backwards from what would I do if, I lost my passport? What would I do if I lost my medications? And then now it's what would I do if I had to quarantine in my hotel for 14 days? Yeah. So it's
I'm just going to stay home. Okay. At least for now. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Right, so there's a lot of RVs being sold right now.
Right? Oh my gosh. I've seen a lot of them on the road. I've seen more commercials. I've seen more ads. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So you probably traveled extensively. What's your favorite place to visit, and what are your favorite place, and where haven't you been that you would like to go?
So my favorite place, it's always so difficult, and I know that travelers that travel a lot, they always have a problem, pinning it down because the experiences are different. So like my favorite place, to go diving has been Egypt. And in some ways it's one of my favorite places to go to because it's just so different than many of the other travel experiences I've had. I mean, it is like complete immersion into just such a different experience. There's all this amazing history. It's beautiful, and the diving is stellar. And so for me, I get all this history. I can see all the different sights, the experiences, the sounds. It's like sensory overload, and I can be a little bit of a germaphobe, and so it's one of those where people, they laugh at me and they're like, "How in the world do you go to a place where there's just like because there's so many people, there's just so much movement?" But for some reason, wow, when I'm out there, it's just it's a very vibrant, very alive place, and like I said, the diving is stellar. So I really love Egypt. on the other side of that, I also had an amazing experience on the Grand Canyon for 5 days where we were rafting and sleeping on the banks of the river. That was outstanding. So it's a very different type. The place I haven't been yet is Antarctica. And I really don't like the cold at all, but I want to see it before it melts. And I know that that's not going to happen like tomorrow, but it is one of those places where I would love to go and do like a 3-week experience and just really, go see Antarctica. They have some diving experiences where you can actually go below the icebergs. I think that's that's extreme even for me. But yeah, I just think it would be magnificent to see.
Well, I mean, I got to say, when I think of diving, I don't think of Egypt. Right? Caribbean, Hawaii, maybe the Mediterranean, different areas, but I don't go to Egypt. I mean, is that a popular thing? That's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. The Red Sea is an amazing diving experience. And when I would talk to people, because I've been twice now, when I would talk to people about diving Egypt, they'd kind of look at me and go, really? You'd go there? But especially for the Europeans, it's really kind of like their Mexico, right? It's kind of their Caribbean. So, I mean, you've got the Mediterranean, sea, but the Red Sea has better fish life. And so if I lived in Germany, but, the UK, France, Italy, they do, daily tours down there. And then the hotels are kind of aligned with the different countries. And so it was really interesting to be on a boat because we actually were on the Red Sea for a week diving. And as you would kind of coast down, you're kind of moving down the coast, you hear all the Italian music from the Italian hotel, the French music, the DJs speaking French. And this one, I think English. It's very much like, if you've been to Mexico or maybe Aruba, because it is Caribbean, but it feels kind of more like Miami, and I apologize to anybody from Mexico that just doesn't want to be compared to Miami. But there's a little bit more of that mixture where, people, English is more common as a language and that feel. But Egypt is the diving, the fish are huge.
Oh my gosh.
Really cool.
Well, okay. So it sounds, does anybody ever come to you, they want to go on a trip and they know they need special planning, but they don't know where to go? I mean, so you come up with a whole idea too. I mean, diving, I wouldn't think of Egypt. So I mean, something like that, if anybody who has special needs and you find places, I mean, do they come to you with the idea where they want to go, or do you give them ideas on where to go based on their needs?
Right. Well, so there's a fine line where it crosses more into like travel, like a travel agent, right? And so I am not a travel agent. I don't book per se, but I do help them in terms of understanding the outcome of the experience, right? So if it's somebody who wanted to sail or dive, I mean, by all means, I can throw that information out there because I've done those, those experiences. But in terms of actually booking a place, I mean, I could go and do some research, but I have colleagues that run travel agencies that I could put calls in and work that side of it. If they were looking for a specific resort that maybe it offered a certain type of accommodation that you couldn't find at another venue. I mean, I can do some basic searching on that, but I really have to keep it, like we've already talked about, it's the scope is broad, but it's also narrow in focusing on the health piece, and trying to make sure that, physically, mentally, the mindset, all of this is going together to create that successful experience. And then if I see challenging moments, like I use the example of Machu Picchu, I can say, maybe we need to do a train instead of hiking. And if you're just committed to hiking, well, then what about hiring a porter? I know that there's a way to do that. So I would have to work with somebody else who would try to arrange that piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, that's good clarification. Thank you so much. You're very, very specialized and very obviously knowledgeable, but that's good to know. Okay. So if you can give one piece of, valuable advice to anybody who's planning a special needs trip or something along that line. What is there one piece of advice that you could share with people?
I'd have to say you really need to be honest with where you are right now, you know, and not discount or inflate or, you know, gloss over a challenge that might be there. And it's not that I don't want people in a positive mindset, and I want people to stretch, and I believe in that. But I guess it was last summer, my husband and I took a trip to Galapagos. Ooh. And I've been diving for years, and this was my bucket list trip. I mean, I have been wanting to go to Galapagos since back in the 70s when I knew what Galapagos was. And so my husband booked it and surprised me with this vacation. And I had been looking at getting sinus surgery because I was having some difficulty with clearing my ears while I was diving. And the older I get, it was becoming more and more of a problem. And so the docs had said, you need sinus surgery. You're not getting air. You know, this side of your face is not equalizing. We can go in there and fix that. We didn't coordinate very well. So we ended up taking the trip before I had the sinus surgery.
Oh, okay.
Now, diving with my old sinuses was not necessarily bad, but what was happening is I wasn't able to descend quickly. And in the Galapagos, we went when it was supposed to be an easier time to dive with slower currents and not a lot of, you know, crazy water environment, you know, that it was supposed to be just a milder diving experience. And I was having a really difficult time going to depth rapidly. The currents were kicking in a way that even the dive masters were just overwhelmed with. They were like, this is like winter diving. This should not be going on. And, you know, you can't control Mother Nature. It's going to be what it is. And so I ended up having a lot of ear pain. You know, I was on the verge of, I mean, I'm a pretty cautious diver, but, you know, there were those moments where you really want to see the schooling hammerheads, and there's hundreds, you know, of sharks in the water, and you want to be there, and you spent thousands of dollars.
Right.
But you know you can't push it, because if you push it, you blow out an eardrum. Now you've got a mess, right? And so I ended up having to sit out about a third of the dives. And so even though I'd been diving for years, and even though I'm healthy and all this, you know, and it was my, you know, this, you know, dream experience, I didn't fully appreciate where I was, you know, and how I needed that surgery. And so circling back to what you asked, you know, be honest with yourself, you know, and there's no shame in saying, you know, I need to back up. I need a different experience. You know, maybe I don't have enough time. Maybe I need to learn something. All of this can be managed, but you don't want to push yourself and have a negative outcome because you thought, oh, well, you know, we're just going to gut this out. It's not that big of a deal, because inevitably that will come back.
Doesn't always.
Yeah, it does. And it's just the way it is, right? And so that's my one advice. People don't like to admit, you know, sometimes they perceive that as weakness. I just say it's common sense and honoring who you are and what you're bringing to the table right now, and, you know, doing what you got to do. Because the goal is to dive again.
That's right. You know,
the goal is to travel again. It is not to push it for this one time.
Wow. That is probably one of the best pieces of advice that you could use, not just in travel, but in so many other places in life too. That's very insightful, very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this interview. This has been amazing. And I'll put all your contact information in the show notes, but why don't you go ahead and tell people now where they can find you to learn more.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. So I have a website, and it's at wayfinderadvantage.com. So it's all one word. So, you know, the www.wayfinderadvantage.com. Mm-hmm. And on Facebook, I have, so it's at Wayfinder Advantage. And I'm in both places. Instagram is a little new to me, so I'm learning that. That's my September goal. I have to admit,
all right.
I'm Gen X, and so I don't necessarily live in story with photos.
Very good.
I'm finding my way. But September, my Instagram will look better than it does.
Awesome.
So that's really how you find me. And you can, if you're on Facebook, you can direct message me. You can schedule an appointment. I offer a discovery session where we do, really a 20-minute just, tell me where you're going, what you want to do. I just love hearing that travel, what your travel dreams, aspirations are. And then we can really look at, how we could craft an experience that is right for you.
Well, gosh, that's awesome. And again, everybody, I'm going to have all this information in the show notes and on the website. And Andrea, I haven't heard, it'll be social media. There was no way you won't be able to find her. Trust me. And you're going to want to, because state of the world, I think Andrea is your ticket to enjoying where you want to go. So again, Andrea, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, thank you for tuning in once again to the Pink Lifestyle Podcast. I wish you well on designing your pink life, purposeful, inspirational, natural, and kind. Again, thank you for listening, and until next time, bye.
Thank you for listening to the Pink Lifestyle Podcast. Again, you can reach me on my website, KarenKBannister.com, or email pinklifestylepodcast@gmail.com. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and others, and on social channels including Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Pinterest as Pink Lifestyle Podcast. Congratulations on starting your journey. Please share this with your friends and family and focus on creating your own pink life. Until next time.